welcome back to the live morning show. We are here with Kathy Akers of Fathom Realty. We were kind of joking about the spelling of each other's last name. I tried to throw a Y into her name, and she was like, no. There is no Y. I told her, I said, people seem to want to throw a W in mine.
That's right.
All the time. But Kathy, glad to have you here today.
Good morning.
And let me start with, how was Easter for you and your family?
Very good. Nice, relaxing. How about you?
It was great. I will say this: I'm egg hunted out though.
Okay.
I've had my share of eggs and hiding them and finding them and chasing little cousins but it was a good time.
Well, that's good. We stopped by the Mills this weekend for their adult one, and I don't know if they ever found all the eggs or not, but anyway, it was nice.
Somebody will find one 6 months from now.
That's right, but it was nice to see a lot of people out and about on Saturday at the Mills, so it was a nice change of pace.
Absolutely. Well, as regular viewers of our show know, every other Monday Kathy is with us from Fathom Realty. She talks about real estate and has a different subject, different topic for us, and today Kathy is what I find to be quite an interesting topic. 7 considerations when buying an older home. And one of the first questions I asked you was, do you literally have people that will come to you and say, hey Kathy, that's what I want? How big of a trend is this becoming in the realty world now, people looking for an older home?
Well, it's not so much a trend, but it's people that have grown up in older homes.
Okay.
Or maybe have remember grandmother's house, that kind of thing, and they want to get back to that that type of style of house. So we do have people that'll come in, and we have several historic neighborhoods, the Mills being one, but West Haven, and are some fabulous houses over in West Haven.
Oh, absolutely.
The historic district in Tarboro, again, some very lovely homes with some unique architectural details. So if that's the type and style of home you're looking for, we definitely have those homes around.
Absolutely.
But there are some things to consider if you're not familiar with living in an older home and you're wanting to buy one. These are some things that you really need to consider as you make that purchase. We talk about due diligence. That's that time frame for you to do your investigations of the property so you know what you're purchasing.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Let me ask you real quickly before you go into those points, something that you said, you're talking about like a sentimental value for people. It's like you can look at that and say, well, this is something that means a lot to them. So I guess as a realtor, you have to kind of know the intricacies of these homes so that you can take it to that person and say, well, here's why this home would connect to what you're. I had never really thought of it that way. Somebody growing up used to a certain thing, they that's what they want. So having that connection with your customer is vital.
It is. I usually try to talk to someone and really get a feel of what they're looking for. And even as we go through the house the process of looking at homes, I want them to point out the things they like, the things they don't like. So that gives me a better idea of what to find for someone.
Absolutely.
But to get into our topics, the biggest one, and not necessarily the most expensive, but usually one of the more difficult things to do is checking the electrical wiring. Okay? There are a lot of homes that have been updated, but there are still homes out there that still have the knob and tube wiring. We're quite aware of those. Or the insulation on the wiring is fraying and that kind of thing. So that's one of those big things. You definitely, if you're looking at an older home, that's one of the major things you're going to want. Consider having, beside your home inspector, have an electrician come in, looking at the panel box. Are we still on the old fuse type thing, screw-in fuses, or are they the really old tube ones?
Now, do most homes leave the original electrical? I mean, do they, or do you see a lot of them trying to or is that almost seen as taking away from the allure of?
No, we do see a lot of them updating for a simple reason. What we use today, as far as our electrical output, or you know what our needs are not anywhere near what they originally were built for.
Right.
So between our TVs, our computers, all of our electronic systems, that will put a tax on the electrical system.
Right.
So we want to make sure that whatever your intentions are, that the electrical system can handle what you're looking for.
Right.
You don't want to, every time you plug in a blow dryer, blow a fuse.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
So that's one of those main things.
Okay.
The one that we more often people think about is the HVA system. Okay. What's the system like? You know, we still have some old floor furnaces around in some of the older homes around here.
Yeah. No.
So if they're still functioning, is it, you know, something that you can, you know, easily maintain?
Right.
But a lot of those did not have air conditioning.
Wow.
So,
yeah,
you know,
that's true.
talk to somebody about, you know, is it still a functioning, efficient system? Because, you know, that's going to be one of the things that, as far as your heating and cooling bills, but is it something that's going to be easily replaced when it's time to replace that?
Right.
You know, we see a lot of furnaces, you know, and where they've put some of these units, it's going to take a while for somebody to try to replace one of those,
absolutely.
especially if they're crawling in a small crawl space, or are they trying to take it out of a closet somewhere in the back of the home. So if you've been around, you know what I'm talking about. So those are things to think about. Where are your needs going to be met with that HVA system?
Sure.
So looking at that, how about the roof?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the roof is another one of those things. There's a lot of different roofing materials. So is it a roof that's one of the, you know, the old clay, you know, there was clay tiles, there were other types of things, but the other piece to look at that was when they replaced that roof, if they had replaced it, did they just put the new roofing tiles down or shingles over top of the old ones?
Right.
You know, did they not take it down to a clean slate, so to speak? So that can cause issues, because if you've got that material decaying underneath the top layer of shingles, that's going to cause some issues.
Now, what is the average, I'm sure you know, the average, I don't say lifespan, but of a roof before, and I understand you can come across different issues,
That's
but
right.
average, how long does it last before it needs attention?
It usually about 20 years. Some of the newer materials do have a longer lifespan.
Okay.
But you know, it could even be as little as 10 years, depending on the type of, whether it's composite shingle, you know. Now, if you've got a tin roof, that you know, that'll be a while.
Story, yeah.
That's a whole different story. But looking at those types of things, you know, and like I said, the other piece is whoever if they put another roof on, how was that put on?
Gotcha.
You know, that's going to be you know, if you had a company that just came in and just slapped the shingles over top of the old.
Right.
You know, that's not always a good thing.
Now, when they're working on older homes as opposed to newer homes, and the reason I ask this is because you'll have even roofers will disagree on how to handle certain aspects. Is there typically a different way or style when you're dealing with an older home, or is it more just whatever that individual circumstance is?
Well, I think it'll play to the individual circumstance.
Right.
But the other thing to think about is making sure you have somebody that's qualified that can identify the roofing shingles that you're working with, because, you know, as always, we have to think about the EPA guidelines. Is it something that, is there asbestos or things like that? We want somebody that knows what they're working with
Right.
and knows how to dispose of it properly.
Absolutely.
So again,
Very important.
do your research when you're talking with any of these contractors. Find out if they know what they're doing. Have they worked on a historic property or an older home? Because some of some people do not want to even deal with those. So because of, as I said, the guidelines that they have to deal with.
I would certainly probably want someone that has some experience with an older home coming in and doing all that work. And that's something that you wouldn't normally think about. So that's a very good point.
And even your home inspector, find out how much, when they come in and doing that, let them know that you're buying a 100-year-old house.
Right.
Or however old it is. See if they have any experience dealing with that type of structure.
Okay.
Because as we're talking about, it does present some unique features that not every home has.
Right.
Let's talk about the foundation.
Yes.
The foundation, that's besides the moisture that, we are, one of those areas that we do have a lot of moisture during the summer and that kind of thing. But what about the foundation? Over the years, I've been in older properties where they dry stacked the blocks. They weren't cemented together, that kind of thing. Nowadays, they do that. It could be they just, some of the really, really older homes, they may have just had flat stones that they stacked up underneath there. Over the years, if something happened, did they go in and put in the old jacks, a freestanding jack in there? So those are things to look at. Is there settling? How are the floor joists hitting on those piers? That kind of thing.
Because if you don't catch some of those things or let them go too far, correct me if I'm wrong, of all the things we've discussed, foundation issues can probably turn into about the most costly problem of all of this.
It can.
I would say.
Because it's not just what you're finding underneath the house.
Right.
It affects everything in the house to that.
Exactly.
If there's any settling, the door jams, you're going to start seeing cracks in the walls, those kinds of things. So, your foundation, as with anything, that you want a solid foundation to build everything on. So, addressing any of those issues is another
vital
thing. Lead paint. Anything prior to 1978 is most likely has lead-based paint. Now, listen, that didn't mean all the lead-based paint went off the shelves in 1978.
Right.
So, you may have a house that was built in the early 80s that still had lead-based paint, okay? Because that's what they either had sitting in the garage to use, or that's what was still on the shelf at the paint store. So lead-based paint is one of those things that is there. Definitely any home built before 1940 is going to have lead-based paint.
Right.
So the question becomes, there's two ways of dealing with lead-based paint. There is having a professional that's been certified, that knows what they're doing, that's going to come in. They're going to scrape it all down to the base. They're going to collect all of that frayed paint, the paint chips, all of that dust, and they're going to, they know how to collect that and dispose of it properly.
Wow.
Okay. That can get costly as well.
I was going to say, yeah.
EPA says the other way to deal with it is what they call encapsulate. That means paint over it,
Really?
So, yes, so
without scraping any?
That, if you know what you're doing and can scrape that, but look at the EPA guidelines on this. If by all means, look at that before you do anything to touch the paint in the house.
Right.
Because that's going to be an issue, and especially if you have small kids in the house.
Right. For sure.
Talk to somebody, and you can always go to the EPA's government site to look for answers.
Sure.
Plumbing. That can be an issue. Let's talk about some of the older pipes.
Okay.
Galvanized pipes that were used. They actually break down from the inside out. Okay, so there's the corrosion and that kind of thing. So the flow is not there that used to be there.
Right.
So they can be quite costly to replace. And usually that's going to be all the way from the main connection to the to city water or county water, all the way to the house. You know, could possibly be one of those.
Right.
The others are clay pipes. You know, they use that as well. So clay pipes, you know, roots and that kind of thing, they were easily breakable. You know, so that's one of those things. The other is the polybutylene piping that came through, you know, in the 80s. It can break down and degrades rapidly and can lead to burst pipes. So looking at, you know, as I said, not just inside and underneath the house, but also consider having somebody to look at what the flow is from the road.
Absolutely.
You know, because we want to know, is it something that later down the line you're going to have this nasty they're going to come through and cut up your yard, the front yard going to the road. So it all, you know, those things, you know, catching all of those things ahead of time. So you know, even if you're okay with some of those things being there, you know your expenses as far as if you plan to upgrade anything.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And then that leads just to upgrading. You know, because older homes do have issues that not everybody has. You know, a home built in the 70s and 80s didn't have ground fault control outlets.
Right.
If you're going to upgrade, that means any of that, like you're going to upgrade the kitchen or the bathroom, you have to bring that home up to code in that room that you're upgrading.
Right.
So you have to meet today's codes for that room. So let's say a home built in the early, let's say 1915 or 1920s. They didn't have electrical outlets, you know, as many as you would in a current home. If you're doing any upgrading, you're going to have to add electrical outlets.
Right.
So those are the things to think about. Some of the older homes don't have the insulation like we do now.
Right.
So,
do you consider some of those codes to be like nitpicky today, or some of them are?
Not necessarily, but
they need to be there.
There are some reasons some of those are in place. But you know, like especially the ground fault controls. And just so you know, you don't, you know, there's some different opinions, but it's my understanding that if there's the electrical loop, let's say in the kitchen, if you have the ground fault at that first electrical loop or one near the sink, not every outlet needs to be replaced.
Right.
But again, I'm not an electrician, so consult with a licensed electrician.
Right,
you know,
right.
they're going to know the ins and outs of what actually needs to be done.
Right, right.
So, you know, and again, you know, making sure your contractor actually knows what they're doing.
Right. Definitely,
So,
definitely.
all right.
Well, that's really good information, and like I say, there's so many aspects of real estate that you don't think about. So having a real estate professional such as Kathy to answer all those type of questions and walk you through that. But I appreciate you highlighting those 7 aspects of buying an older home, giving people that opportunity to think about that. But also, you know, the historic districts here in our area, as you mentioned, you'd love to, you know, take people and show them that. And so how do people get in touch with you, Kathy?
They can always give me a call. You can reach me at 252-266-4038.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for coming
Thanks,
in
Frank.
again today, and like I say, wonderful information. When we return on the live morning show, Fred will give us an update on the weather, and then we'll open up the phone lines for discussion, what John and I were opening up with the email situation at the City Council. So stay with us. We'll be right back.